Let's go. Oh my gosh. Why I really like it. This is given me. That's your side. You oh, I have to think, so this guy's approved. Yeah. No, that's yeah. But if you tell me the dog, you know, I would have that. You want to better the way everything goes next. She didn't need it as long. It's always easy. Yes. Whatever you do, Right. I think that's why. From the subway station. No. You don't have shade. So. لا لا مرة Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Harriet Tubman Institute, and welcome to our Black History Month 2024 opening. Where's the record? I guess the idea is for everyone to just start that. ولو حاجة جدا all right, sorry. Now we're back. Welcome, everybody. My name is Shaliwa. I am the director at the Harriet Tubman Institute. Here you are. Welcome, and welcome to our opening ceremony for Black History Month 2024. Today, well, this month, our theme is on Black education and Black educators. So experiences around Black education, what that means. But before we start, I would, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. The purpose of Harriet Tubman Institute for Research on Africa and African Diaspora, as the name says, is a center, and I like to add a safe space for people's research on Africa and African diaspora. It's one of the, it's the place at York where you could safely do your research on the things that I like to say in class people feel comfortable with. It's the place where you can speak on the things that you are researching in these areas that you would be able to get good, constructive feedback that would help your research for these areas. So one of the things that we're going to have today, first of all, we're going to have Sharon speak. Sorry, I I know you missed that. Sorry. So we're going to have Sharon speak on our grad students and the experiences and the fellowship that we have available to grad students as well. And then after that, we're going to have our associate director who's going to introduce herself and speak um, on the panelists that we're about to listen to and to listen to their experiences. Hopefully we can glean from their wealth of knowledge. And then we would have Bianca, who's in charge of our weekly Tubman Talks, moderate the session. First of all, Sharon, you wanna? Sorry.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Harriet Tubman Institute. It's a delight to see all of you here. And we also have some students outside. So I just want to give you a little tidbit about being a graduate student on the Harriet Tubman Institute Executive Board. We meet on a regular basis to ensure that we are reaching out to community members, listening to them, and doing things that help them promote their graduate studies. We also would like to have an undergraduate student on the executive. Yes. So if anyone is interested, we would definitely appreciate your putting your hand up. One of the things that I like about the Tubman space is that it's a welcoming place. You feel at home. You see people of your own kind and background, whether it's Black, Indigenous, Arabs. We're all here at the Tubman Center working together harmoniously. I've been here for about maybe 4 or 5 years. So that means I'm almost done with my PhD. Fingers crossed. Yeah, it's a battle, but with community, things get better because we bounce things off of each other. I think that's it. But if you're interested, get on the listserv if you're not already. So you can be invited to lots of activities, not just only within the Tubman, but also within York, right? I think funding. Oh, funding. There, yes, sorry, thank you. Yes, which I've been a recipient of. There is a scholarship that is available to students who are registered with Tubman. You sign up. You make sure that you attend at least 4 Tubman talks that occur every Thursday, 2:30 till 4. And once you have done that, you are eligible to sign up for the scholarship. Okay. The other thing I wanted to just quickly let students know, if there are students with disabilities, there is a foundation. It's called the Tamara Gordon Foundation. And it gives scholarships to students with disabilities. You are eligible to apply once a year. And I just want to give you a little background on Tamara. Tamara was a student. She was very involved in athletics. She had an injury when she went skiing. It left her paralyzed and without the use of her dominant hand. This happened in 2001. In 2009, we graduated from York with honors cum laude with a 91% average, and she was on the dean's list. She then decided that she wanted to give back to the community and to show people that no matter what your challenges are, you still can proceed and progress. So it's her motto is, yes, you can. And so what she has done, she and her mom got this foundation up and running, and it's available for students to apply to and receive the bursary. So make sure if you know of any students that have disabilities, are registered with accessibility services here at York, they are eligible, and they could get a pamphlet and submit an application. It's not only for students at York, she has also provided scholarships for students in other universities. If you know of any donors that would like to donate to Tamara Gordon Foundation, please let me know and I'll put you in contact with her. They're also looking for donors so that these scholarships can continue. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, everyone. So as Shelly said, my name is Ruth Rodney. I'm the incoming Associate Director for the Harriet Tubman Institute. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Nursing here at York. And again, we want to welcome all of you on behalf of not only ourselves, but also the rest of the executive committee and Rebecca for coming into this space and kind of kicking off Black History Month.
Oh, thank you. With us, I don't think this is this on? On. Okay. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, just
Okay. And so just to also start by recognizing that the Tubman Institute is on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and it's governed by those treaties. And really, when we think about Harriet Tubman and Harriet Tubman's legacy, we recognize and understand also the importance of the land. And how the land was also very important and integral into her ability to be able to bring people, many enslaved Africans across North America, Turtle Island. And so I think it's always important for us to also remember and recognize that not only was the land important for these important voyages, it is also the holder of our ancestors. It is there for many people, their final resting place, not only the land, but also the waters. And so what I think when I think about Harriet Tubman, you know, there's a couple of quotes that really always come to mind that resonate with me with what she said. One of the things is that every dream starts with a dreamer. And within you, you have that strength, you have patience, you have the audacity to really kind of keep pushing forward. And we know that even though February is Black History Month, we make history every day. And we want this to be an inspiring way to start the month, and also to remember that you all are loved, you're valued, you contribute to your communities, which is incredibly important. And one of the areas that we seem to always face challenges is within education. And so it's this interesting place that offers us the opportunities to have these great talks and to reflect with one another, but it also is a space of challenge. And so we want to keep kind of pushing forward and sort of, but we're hoping that today with the talk that we have, that you can sort of take this, what you've listened to today, and have these conversations within the community moving forward. So we are creating history every day. It's not something that is in the past, it is the present. And so to begin, we have a great panel here of speakers. I'm going to start at the far end. Dr. Solomon Boyke Yadam, and pardon me if I mispronounced your name. He is a professor at York University's Lasagne School of Engineering. He's an innovative researcher in material science and engineering. His expertise in metal additive manufacturing and advanced alloy development is notable, focusing on creating novel materials using methods like metal 3D printing and machine learning. He excels in analyzing these materials under high strain rate conditions, with particular emphasis on their deformation and impact resistance, especially in engineering applications under extreme loading and harsh environments. I already know I'm going to learn a lot today because I'm nursing. This aspect of his work has gained significant support, including a notable NSERC Alliance fund. His scope extends beyond structural materials to the development of biomaterials and studying the dynamic responses of materials under shock loading. With a comprehensive educational background in materials science, biomechanical, and aerospace engineering, he is definitely collaborated across various sectors in industry and academia. He has been instrumental in establishing a cutting-edge manufacturing facility supported by CFI funding for the creation of next-generation materials. Recognized for his public engagement and mentorship, he received the 2023 Lassonde School of Engineering's Public Engagement Award, underlining his commitment to promote STEM inclusivity. His vision focuses on leveraging machine learning to revolutionize material design, particularly in rapid alloy design and defect prediction in metal additive manufacturing. So I'm going to ask actually everybody to hold their applause until the end of reading everyone's bios. Dr. Ola Mohammed specialized in interdisciplinary research exploring Black culture production, Black social life, and Black being as sites of possibility. Her dissertation, The Black Nowhere, the Social and Cultural Politics of Listening to Black Canada in Canada's, examines the sonic dimension of anti-Blackness in Canada. Her research interests include Black popular music, Black studies, sound studies, diaspora studies, performing theory, and digital culture. Dr. Mohammed has an extensive background in studied student activism, is a founding member of the York Black Graduate Students Collective, which advocated and worked to implement Black studies, Black Canadian studies at York at the undergraduate and graduate level, and is looking forward to continue to contribute to the development of Black studies at York as a faculty member. Dr. Boateng is an assistant professor at the School of Global Health and Canada Research Chair in Global Health and Humanitarianism at York University. He is also the director of the Global and Environmental Health Lab and a faculty fellow at the Dalvey Institute for Global Health Research. His research program is transdisciplinary and focuses on resource insecurity, health and sustainable livelihoods, the socio-ecological determinants of cardiometabolic conditions in aging adults, social inequity in health systems, quantitative data analysis methods and survey scale development, and COVID-19 related health effects. Before joining York University, Dr. Boateng was an assistant professor of public health and an affiliate faculty at the Multi-Interprofessional Center for Health Informatics at the University of Texas at Arlington. He trained and worked as a postdoctoral fellow in global health at Harvard University, Northwestern University, and Cornell University. He graduated from Western with a PhD in sociology in 2016. Dr. Lawrence Goodrich is a full professor and a Canada Research Chair at Foodborne Pathogen Dynamics in the Department of Food Science at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. He is also the director of Guelph's Canadian Research Institute for Food Safety. Dr. Goodrich applies genomics to study foodborne bacterial pathogens and antibiotic resistance within a One Health context. Dr. Goodrich's expertise in food safety and public health has led to many academic, government, and industrial collaborations in the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, and Africa. In addition to these partnerships, he has also worked internationally with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the World Bank on food safety-related initiatives. In addition to his scientific achievements, Dr. Goodrich is an active advocate for diversity and inclusion in academia. He was awarded a North American Colleges and Teachers of Agriculture Charles N. Shepardson Meritus Teaching Award in 2012, and he is the president-elect of the Canadian Black Scientists Network. His insights regarding the importance of representation and mentorship are invaluable.
And I'm also your cousin.
Yes. And my husband. Most importantly. And Dr. Molade Osebo. No, go ahead. Tell me. Oshibodu. Thank you. Is an assistant professor of mathematics education at York University. Her research critically examines the experiences of Black youth in mathematics education. Dr. Oshibodu is specifically interested in examining ways to decolonize mathematics education for liberatory futures, engaging with social justice issues, and exploring African Indigenous mathematics practices. That's amazing. So I want everybody to give a very warm welcome to our and guiding this discussion today is going to be Dr. Bianca Boschman, who is also an executive member on the Tubman Institute. So we just also want to welcome Dr. Boschman.
So while we're still giving the applause, we want to thank the people who made today happen. We want to thank our sponsors for today's event. We have the Dudley Institute for Global Health Research, and they are represented by Dr. Godfrey. Yes, thank you very much. We have the Mubat Center for Canadian Studies, who actually Mohammed is a strong part of. Thank you. We have York University African Studies program. Is we represented by Dr. Mohammed says. We have York University's Research Center for Public Sociology. Yes, the Ghanaian was always welcoming. Where did Sylvia go? Dr. Sylvia Bawa. And then we have York University's Black Canadian Studies Certificate program also sponsoring this event. So thank you all very much. We are truly grateful. Now we're going to have our panel. I'm pretty sure our panel is kind of ready. They're ready to give us some part of we heard the vibe, so there's a lot to learn here. So I hope we can all
All right. Welcome, everybody. We went through that. I'm really excited to be here and talk to our esteemed panel here. I think what struck me the most is that you're all coming from different fields and must have such different ways of thinking about educators, of education and being Black educators. But I also suspect that there might be some threads between the different things that you're going to be discussing today. So we have the way in which we formulated our questions have sort of different contexts, and I'd like to start off with the historical context of education, Black education, and Black educators. So it's a multi-level questions, as we like to do in academia. So, you know, choose one, build, scaffold, however you'd like. But how have the contributions of Black educators in your field shaped the evolution of education? Are there strategies or lessons from history that can be applied to address current disparities in Black education or empower Black educators? I don't know who would like to dive in first. I am known to sometimes pick on my students, but no. Yeah, who would like to start first? Just the historical context, the contribution of Black education.
I'll probably start. And so from the field of global health, one would say that the field has embedded in its foundation the relics of colonialism. You know, its predecessor, before you think of global health, you need to think of international health. And it was in the system in the 1900s. But when you think of international health, the historical antecedents, whether you are looking at the European imperialism, colonialism, slave trade, you know, industrialization, all served as key factors that propel the need for us to look at international health. How do we address some of these challenges? And so back to colonialism, we understand that with imperialism, the extension of control, for example, to the west coast of Africa, was met with all kinds of diseases. The Europeans brought along with them their own diseases, and within Africa, they encountered malaria, they encountered dysentery, which resulted in several of them dying at some point. One could say that the prevalence was about 50%. You get in there, or the mortality rate was about 50%. 1 out of every 2 individuals that died. And so there was a need for them to, figure out, how do we survive in this space to be able to continue with the exploitation? They were in Gold Coast for the gold, they were in Ivory Coast for the ivory, and that brought about the need for them to look at something, some discipline, something to look at. But in the process, they had to learn from the indigenous people. So when you think of education, the education at that point was more or less coming from the indigenous community. It was coming from the people who lived there, and they had lived with these diseases and had survived it, right? And when you think of the London School of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, in the first half of the 20th century, everything it did was to fund research, was to fund students to be able to propel and keep this imperial rule, right? And they've stated it themselves, but this has changed over time, right? And in time, some of the things that were learned were not ascribed to the indigenous. It became sort of the property or the proprietary of those who came to learn, right? And so you have knowledge that have been passed from indigenous populations to Europeans, which when you think of, you look at it as plagiarism or something. They do not ascribe the source to who took it. And I think you still see some of it in the way education runs today. But when you think of global health today, you think of it as more equitable. We've moved from that angle, but I like to say that there are still relics within. But probably let me end with this note that in time, we've had a change. There's been some decolonization of global health. It's not complete, it's still in the process. And with it has come Black educators. And I want to say, giving an example from the University of Western Ontario, there's a Black educator there, Professor Isaac Lugina, and through his lab, he's mentored several, global health practitioners who are in key places. So yes, while the beginnings have not been that great, today we can speak of Black educators making an impact or having an impact in the field. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was such a rich answer, and I feel like there's a way in which that we sometimes separate big events like colonization, imperialism, and outside of these silos of maybe just, history and we're learning about it, as opposed to seeing the ways in which it trickles down in all these different ways. Yes, I thought you were perfect to follow that.
So thank you for your comments. I just want to highlight a couple of things that were said. So one of the things that was said, which I think is something that really needs emphasis, is the fact that so many discoveries have been made by Black people, but those discoveries have been taken, plagiarized, that's the word that you used, by those who would colonize. And so one of the ways to break that cycle is to discuss, some of these discoveries, and to share the true discoverers, so that we know. So I just want to share two in this area of health, public health and diseases. One, so I'm sure everybody here has heard of Ebola. So I'm not sure how many people know that Ebola was actually discovered by a Black African. His name was Dr. Jean-Jacques Mayombe. And he was in Congo. He had studied in Europe, in Belgium, and then returned to Congo, the Congo in 1973. And then in 1976, this mysterious disease started to show up. One of the issues that we still see to this day in Africa is the lack of proper laboratories and research institutions. So 1976, there was no way to study this disease. So Dr. Mayombe took samples and sent it to his previous advisors in Europe, who are now credited with discovering Ebola. Okay, and we still see that today in the way things are published in scientific journals. Teams may go to Africa and then bring the results back. So that's one example. But it's not just Africa or Europe where this happens. It happens right here in Canada, as we know. And so my second example that I want to share with you is so before I was at the University of Guelph, I was at McGill University. And at McGill, there is this Institute of Parasitology, well-known, world-renowned. And I would pass by in the halls of my building, and one of the ways that I think, we talk about how does history affect the current or future. One of the ways is that, again, there's reinforcement of people, like, and I'm talking specifically here in universities. There's often subtle ways that the white population is reinforced. Okay, so one way that I constantly see is you walk in the hallways and you might see pictures of people. And this person did this, and this person did that. I rarely see pictures of non-white people or Black people. Okay, so that's a subtle way. So I'm telling you this because, I've walked in the halls of my building, and here's a picture of a white person, I can't remember his name, who formed this Institute of Parasitology. So imagine my surprise when I think it was about 7 years ago, I was at a Black History event at McGill, and I learned that, in fact, the School of Parasitology, the Institute of Parasitology, was not founded by a white man, but actually a Black man. Dr. Ernest Port, who came from the island of Nevis in the West Indies. And Dr. Duport was a famous parasitologist, and he formed the institute. He trained at he worked on insects and parasites of insects. And just want to make sure I get this right here. By the time of his retirement in 1957, he led McGill University's entomology department and had taught more than half of the practicing entomologists, in Canada. Okay, more than half. So we talk about the impacts of Black educators on education, and yet nobody knows about that. So one of the things I try to do, and one of the things I encourage, my Black colleagues to do, and my Black students to do. First thing is to be proud of who we are, but also to try as much as we can to learn about the suppressed history of our collective Black family, and then to share that and to tell the stories to everybody, because this is the only way that that history will become known, and that's one way I believe that we can begin to address current and even future pathways of Black education.
Thank you so much. I think it's definitely not an idea that that it hasn't happened. We're all living for the labors, the fruits of that labor. It's just unrecognized, right? And I did see at the end over there, Dr. Plakey, that you were vigorously shaking your head, and I'm wondering if you had anything to add to some of the comments that were made. You seem very in agreement, so that's why I'm
No, I did love the history, right? I'm surprised with the big. I love those who know history. It's one of my weakest subjects. So it's because I always struggle with history and all that. With all these that we are saying, look, just as the prof said, we do have wonderful inventions. We do have wonderful things that our people have done, right? But then the system is like that sometimes some of these things are suppressed. So, it's moving forward. We can chart our own path. Okay. Whether somebody is trying to erase the good things you're doing, whether they are trying to hide us behind the screens, whatever, hey, we're still gonna do awesome. Right? And that's the thing I wanted to add to this. Whether they hide it or not, we're just going to do awesome things. And I know you're all great people, you're going to do awesome things. But let's not be, maybe that's the history part. Yeah, I think I need to go do some history. But again, it is what it is. But hey, don't be discouraged. There are people who have done wonderful things. People are not saying the truth. The system is said that we might not be able to come out and say, okay, no, you guys are saying what you're saying is not true. But we can create an awesome new path that people cannot overlook anymore. Okay? And that should be all of us. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think all of us being here today is a manifestation of that, of rectifying that type of lost history. Somebody who I know knows a lot about history, Dr. Ola Mohammed. I was wondering if you had some thoughts.
No, thank you for that. I definitely knew that was coming. But kind of touching on what you were saying, I think what's really interesting in terms of thinking about the idea of the historical context and the formation of different fields is thinking about this larger commitment to liberation that Black people have always had. And so we could talk about the formal formation of the field. So I work in Black studies, and the formal formation of my field began in the 60s and was actually led by students who led a strike, a 133-day strike, right, to challenge the Western hegemonic intellectual traditions of the universities that they went to, right? And this is particularly in the US if we're thinking about Black studies as an individual field. And then we could also, I'm sure some of the questions later on will allow us to think about that and extend it to talking about how Black studies has been formed and is continuing to be formed in Canada. But really, I like to kind of play with some of these questions. And so historically, in terms of a date, 1968, when the field began, but we've been doing this work before and continue to do the work. And also that the university is not the only place where we do this work. And that's what the field of Black studies has always insisted on, right? It started outside of this space and it continues outside of this space. So we've intervened into the university in the 60s.
Dr. Oshibodu, I see you vigorously shaking your head as well, resonating with the fact that the university is not the only space, right, for education. And I was wondering if, this is sort of a historical take that you are also.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I just in the hallway before we were joking about Alana, what is education? As someone who is actually in the field of education, mathematics education in particular, I really appreciated what Dr. Mohammed said at the end there, that so much of learning happens outside of formal spaces. And that part is really important to acknowledge. And I was trying to think about how far to go historically, thinking about my field and whether to focus on my field as education or my field as math education. Specifically, and it was already brought up here earlier about coloniality, which cannot not be discussed in the context of education. formal education and schools in particular was very much wielded as a space for colonial, how should we call them? The colonial, I don't like to say masters because that sounds weird. Those guys. In a lot of the work that we do now, I was thinking, immediately of the South African context where I lived and worked for a while. There was the separation of education for Black South Africans and the other type of education. That was always the case. Because, and if we think back to eugenics and this notion that our skulls were smaller, so we can't somehow learn the same things that our white counterparts were learning, and of course all of these have been debunked over and over again, thankfully. But in math education, it still remains the case that somehow there is this notion that there are those who are born with the innate abilities to do math, white people, perhaps South Asians, and others, but somehow Black people do not have the innate ability to do mathematics. That's been, many have written about this in history and continue to talk about these issues, and I make this connection again to coloniality and how, math, but I would probably say math and literacy were the two subjects that was often divided for Black people, that we cannot, they were seen as really powerful subjects, and so it had to be taken away from us. I don't want to go too much in detail, but I'm grateful, there were some names I wanted to mention. And I'm focusing on racialized spaces like Canada, like the US, South African places like that, where there's scholars like Dana Martin, Carl James here at York University, scholars. I also want to mention Funke Aladejebi, who is a historian, but has done a lot of work, a historian of education as well, who has really done, these three names that I mentioned have really done a lot of work in speaking about the inequities that Black, well, if I speak about Carl James and Dana Martin in particular, the inequities that Black learners face in schools, and the ways that there's very much a separate type of education that we can see a historical past and that is still at play today. And I'll pause there since I assume that we'll come back to that.
You must be right. Yes, thank you so much. I think all of your insights really highlight not only the past, but the current era as well, and sort of the direction where I want to take this now, the current landscape of education in your various fields and your current educational landscape. What challenge and opportunity exists for Black educators? And how do these factors impact the quality of Black education in different environments? I feel like you've already sort of touched on that, but in the everyday sort of purview of your individual fields, how do you see that manifest in the present? And I do love, Doctor, that you had brought up sort of the resistance that is also inherently happening. So if you could talk about the challenges and also the resistance that you're currently seeing. You can.
Yeah. Well, it's all still in my head. I wrote a paper recently, and I was thinking about, I had read a report that the Toronto, it wasn't called the Toronto District, the Toronto Board of Education or something to that effect. Apologies for forgetting the exact name, but that the same issues, they had done a study, and the same issues that Black parents were talking about is still happening today. And this was from, I'm pretty sure the report I saw was from the 70s, complaining about how Black youth are constantly made to feel like they don't belong in spaces. And in my field, in math education particularly, even with contemporary studies that I have done and others have done, the same issues persist with teachers, with peers, assuming that simply because you're Black, you cannot possibly know this level of mathematics that is being taught. And so with that, it is impossible to somehow then assume that mathematics education, perhaps even education broadly, is a neutral space, because it is not. There's a lot of bias at play, a lot of overt racism at play in education that we have to pay attention to, but there remains a lot of pushback. And so I'll speak from the researcher side, and also even the school board point of view. The researcher side, scholar Gloria Lattin-Billings is one of the first scholars that really brought critical race theory into education a long time ago. At this point, probably in the 90s, I want to say. For those of us who maybe are up to speed on the discourse around critical race theory, or CRT for short, there has been a lot of right-wing pushback. And CRT at the baseline is recognizing that racism is endemic, that we have to acknowledge that, and even in education, we have to acknowledge that. And yet, the right wing is saying that no, it's actually, in fact, racist to claim that racism is at play, which is very confusing and false. But that becomes difficult, because if we're going to pretend like race is not a factor in education, then how do we address issues that are happening in education? We have to have a baseline of truth, which seems to be ever shifting in our society. And one example of that, the Ontario government in 2021 published a de-streamed curriculum. So for those who might not be aware, Ontario in grade 9 mathematics had 3 different streams for mathematics. So there was the academic stream, the applied stream, and the locally developed. And a number of researchers, including Carl James, my colleague, another colleague, Gillian Parrick, and many others, had done a lot of research to show that Black students were tended to be pushed into the applied stream or the locally developed stream. You fail a test and suddenly, oh, you are not capable and you have to move. And a number of research had also shown that being pushed out, particularly in grade 9 of the academic stream, radically impacted your post-secondary path and beyond. And so, thankfully, due to a number of activists, a number of educators really pushing, the Ontario government did stop streaming mathematics in grade 9 starting in 2021. And there was a lot of language in the curriculum that was published around, the reasons for this, and really trying to address these inequities that happened. There was so much pushback that the government started removing language. And thankfully, we have documentation of the original language that was there, and the version that is now existing, where they took away so much of the language around this. And so it's very disheartening because the government, knowing that there was a reason why they chose this stream, still couldn't withstand the right-wing criticism and choosing to go away from that. And so I very depressing for me to talk about this, but I feel like this is, I think what I would just end with once again is that race has and has always been a factor in education, and in mathematics education in particular. And we have to be honest in recognizing that it is, and that the teaching and learning of mathematics is not a neutral space. And until we begin to accept that truth, even the streaming grade 9 is not going to make a difference in the outcomes of our learning.
Definitely sobering, but important things to know. The streaming thing was such a win, and then it got funneled down. And I think it is a very important key point to think about the fact that sometimes when we think of things that are objective, right? We have this idea that knowledge is objective. We think about it as being neutral, and I think you're really important. I was wondering if any other people want to speak to this concern of neutrality in your field as a particular challenge to change some of the inequities that you see in your field today and some of the different types of resistance practices.
Well, it just the first thing I want to address is the company. This is heavy and depressing. So I think, certainly I felt that way at times, hopeless even, but I think we have to remember that if we look at history, we have seen, slow progress is being made. It's slow. I think we all agree that it should be faster. We want it to be faster. But if we look back, say, 50 or 60 years, we can see that there has been, for example, we're all sitting here. So I try to look for small, when I'm depressed and hopeless, I try to remember and try to look for the small victories. And I think we need to try to remember that. But also the community, right? Yeah. By talking to each other, that can help. So what I was going to say is that in this overall area of health, and I'd certainly like to hear what you have. But we know, for example, that Black medical issues are often overlooked. So a couple examples of that. Many drugs that are used to treat diseases, they're developed, they go through clinical trials to make sure they're safe, and that's where side effects are found and so forth. Much of that work to this day has been done on the white population. So what that means for Black people is that we may have different side effects to a particular drug. But because those side effects are not recognized, they're often ignored. So, and sometimes with very serious consequences to the person who has those symptoms. So medicine is I think one area where this happens. I work in the area of food science, food safety, and it's the same type of thing. The majority of work, and if you try to get research funding, it doesn't happen. Is not on Black food. And I can tell you there are a number of food safety concerns, as with any type of food. But that is not studied because, again, there's still this colonial architecture that informs what should be studied and what is appropriate to be studied and what is acceptable to be studied and what isn't. And oftentimes, what's not acceptable, it has to do with those who are marginalized populations. So there's that. But the other thing I want to talk about is a barrier to current education. So I was talking as a professor, as an academic. Now I want to talk as a parent. So I have the two children, one who's 8 and one who's 10. And I was listening to a lot of your comments, and it really took me back to my parents. My parents are from Guyana, and growing up, I was made very clear to me that there's only a few careers that I could do that would be acceptable. Okay, that's a medical doctor, a judge, those type of things. Mathematician was not one. So, I think we have to look at the fact that we ourselves have been programmed to believe that there are certain areas that we should not, as a people, study or choose as careers, and we have to make sure, those of us who are parents, that we don't pass that on to our children. Because now it's this double effect, right? Not only are they hearing that in the school, but they could actually inadvertently be hearing it at home as well. And so that's one thing I certainly as a parent try to remember and to expose my children to everything. And again, with this idea of we do have examples. So feel free to go ahead and express yourself in any way that you want.
yeah, I think this conversation lends itself perfectly to some of your work and some of your insights.
Yeah, so when it comes to global health, let's say, and global public health, you would find that there are still some challenges that continue to perpetuate the inequality in the system. One, you can think of limited participation of experts from low and middle income countries, particularly those of those who are underrepresented in many spaces when it comes to policy, when it comes to funding, when it comes to a number of things that pertains to moving the field forward, right? And so in that direction, it becomes sort of a structural thing that you cannot really change. But the fact is, inroads have been made. The call for representation, I think someone had talked about it, some form of equal representation. That way, when we are talking about issues, you're able to talk about it from the perspective of the people or the individuals with whom the problem is concerned. Let's think of malaria per se, because of global health. I mean, it's been around for years, right? It was just about 2 years, a year ago, that they found some vaccine. Why that? But malaria has killed thousands and continues to kill thousands and thousands of children and people every year. Not to discount COVID-19, but you can imagine the harm that it has caused over the years. Yet the effort, the resources, the push to get it sorted out has not been there, right, for a long time. They've been contributing to it, but yeah. Secondly, if you think of the actors, those who do research, example in the global health field, I would say that if you take North American researchers and you take researchers from Europe, you would find just a few individuals from the continent, from Southern Asia or from Sub-Saharan Africa engaged in that field. Why is that the case? I mean, it continues the progress. It brings up the white savior mentality. We have come to research, we have come to tell you what works, and so take it from us, right? But I believe that if we are empowered, if you have a lot more individuals trained in the field from those spaces, then it becomes easier for us to tell you the story and not just it. So for some time, it's sort of a top-down thing. Why don't we have a bottom-up approach where we can develop some of these policies and some of these even drugs with our partners, right? So there's been a challenge there. And when it comes to even funding application, right? If you think of those who sit on these funding boards, that you see the inequity there, right? You're looking at a study that is focusing on, let's say, Ebola in Sierra Leone, and you probably have one person from that region on the funding committee, and all others, they probably may have the technical knowledge, they have the medical knowledge, but they've never been to the field. They do not know what is going on, and so at the end of the day, whatever solutions are brought forth, are biased in a way, and it may sometimes not end up working well for the people. So yes, these challenges are there, but maybe to end it at this point, I like to say that a way to redress this is to identify the curricular gaps, right? And that would be so helpful. So at the university level, at the high school level, to be able to tell our students that, see, when it comes, we bring in the history, we let them know, let's say, Blacks who have been involved in this discipline, who have made a difference, and the fact that they have also the capacity to aspire and make a difference. And like my brother said, if for some reason nobody makes mention of you, you are still making a difference, right? So I'll end it here and have another, you know.
Yeah, I can say something quick, because I think this is something that touches on what a few of my colleagues talked about. But I think about in terms of the current landscape of Black studies, I think about it particularly because for me and my own work, thinking about it from the lens of Canada and the kind of uprising of the development of Black studies as a formal program across many institutions across Canada post George Floyd, and some of the reactions, the kind of white guilt reactions, being like, oh, this is what we'll finally do, finally create these programs to, you know, address the gaps of anti-Black racism, but also don't teach us too much because, you know, right-wing responses and the kind of fascism that's rising in the world, which is making me think of, for some reason, I have this quote like replaying in my head of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will absolutely kill me. And I think of the field of Black studies and the importance of thinking about narrative, right? Like narrative is the terrain of language that allows us to think about the ways in which anti-Black violence gets reproduced, right? In all of our fields, language is the primary site that we are finding to develop new forms of knowledge that allow us to challenge the kind of structures that uphold the racist, colonialist that we constantly experience. And so I think about the work that we're doing on this panel, the work that the Tubman Center does, what folks do in community, the kind of development of Black studies more structurally across different universities. I think about what we're doing at York, what's starting with the Black Canadians Canadian Studies Certificate, right, which began in 2018, and then the eventual development into a major, and the ways in which folks are collectively organizing to push back. It is for me the part that's important for us to think about. Again, is like, how do we organize to create more opportunities, not just for Black educators, but for our communities to learn and have the language to challenge what we experience in and outside of these places. So that's the current landscape of the struggle we're in.
No, thank you, and that's definitely a powerful quote to think about the way in which stories are told and how they informed everything that everybody here is talking about. I was wondering if I can get some of your insights as well, Dr. Bouakpi, and there's something, maybe you could touch on it, you don't have to, but there's something that your colleague said about access, right? About not having access to funding, and I think as somebody who's in engineering with STEM, and I think there's something being done in that aspect, and perhaps your particular insight as to what that looks like would be something.
Maybe I like playing the devil's advocate, so one of the main things. So, for example, right, when the COVID thing came up, when they did the bus, they were looking for there were issues because they couldn't find something. I understand, of course, it's the other person, so you are worried, right? Assuming there was a group of Black people who were doing the buses and they were asking for Black people. But again, so then it's going to be like, well, we are putting ourselves out there. That's how I see it. So, and that's what I'm saying. I understand that. I understand that. But some of these things are entrenched in what the field that we are in now. And then the issue is that, okay, let's be forward. Are they coming? They are not coming. Okay. Saturday, there were, was it of Black Kids Code? Yeah, see? Black Kids Code. And I'm looking at the parents. Nobody's bringing them. Some of them are bringing their kids, Umoja Robotics. So I said of Umoja Robotics. Okay, see? So one of the issues I have is that we are also not putting ourselves out there. As a parent, not as a person. Forget about it. Right? So I'm thinking, where are they? We have Umoja Robotics. These are Black kids from grades 9 to 10, 12 who are building a robot to compete in the first robotic competition. And it's free. It's open to everyone. When they launch it, they go to the mall that is around this January. Nobody comes, nobody shows up, right? You know, go to Black Kids School, kids are not showing up. We invite people to come to the labs, people are not coming. So in some form, I also feel that we are not putting ourselves out to advance some of these things. Because if I develop a passive and I'm trying to look at the reactions from different communities and then nobody's coming, it's gonna have, of course, because I don't know. I'm just gonna use it on the one I have. Now, when I go, I wouldn't go either. You know what I mean? Why? Maybe I didn't trust the person. Right? So it's more of like, okay, so what should we do? It's a matter of we also trying to put ourselves out there, trying to grab some of these opportunities or create some for ourselves. We don't have to do it for people. Why can't we all come together, gather the Black kids, and then we teach them how to 3D print? Why are we waiting for the other people to bring funds in to teach our kids mathematics? We are struggling. Other kids, I don't know if some of them are still. You ask them, who do we like math? And more than half of them, there's less, right? And I'm thinking, so where is sorry, right? But then again, I feel that we need to create our own opportunities, right? We need to. I was telling somebody this Friday that look, if I really had the opportunity, I wish the rich Black people in Ontario or Canada can build a second elementary school and a high school for Black kids. We are not going to hire Black people, but all the profs are Black profs. Why can't we do that? Did you mean it? Can't we do that? We are friends, so we create some of these intentional opportunities for our people. In that case, if you don't bring me to the table, I create my own table. Maybe you might even be interested in coming to dine on my table. Right? And that's how I see some of course, there are challenges. You can ask about the processing. Grants, that's my student. We went for a conference in November, and over 3,000 people, there were only 2 Blacks. We were the only people who were there. And I'm asking, where are people? Over 2,000 people. And this is material science, high entropy alloys. We were the only people who were there. They were making fun of ourselves, like, okay, where is everybody? You know what I mean? Well, all I say is expensive. Okay, we don't have money to go, maybe. But again, let's create opportunities for ourselves. Let's do our own thing. Let's not be waiting for the people anymore. We already know them. We know what they are capable of doing in the past. You know what I mean? Now let's create our own opportunities for ourselves. And I think, who knows, maybe we can get rid of some of these challenges. That's just my take.
Can I just respond?
Yes.
So 100% agree. I just want to, respond a little bit to your example about the vaccine. So absolutely, our suspicion in the Black community. Why? Because historically, right, we have we can think of a million examples, but the Tuskegee experiments, right? And so there's this historical distrust. On that note, so what can we do about it? Well, what we can do about it is we need more people who look like us to be in these fields. It's known that people are more likely to trust some people who look like them. Okay, so I'll share with you quickly this story that I have. So I'm mentoring a young Black student. He's a high school student. He's in grade 11. His name is Noah Bryan. Very, very bright student. In fact, he did his science fair project in my lab at 12 and won the gold and platinum medals at the Canada Wide Science Fair. Okay, so very bright. I think he's so bright that in 20 years, we'll know about it. Okay, I think he's a prodigy. He's done other things. His mother is a medical doctor. His father's an engineer. He started his own foundation. And he goes and he educates Black people about health. So the first topic was hypertension, a major problem in the Black community. He through his connections from his mother, he formed a partnership with a medical device company that makes blood pressure cuffs, goes to Black churches, organizes events where he teaches the Black people about hypertension and then teaches them how to use the blood pressure cuffs and donates. Okay, perfect example of what you're saying. I think we definitely have to, and we definitely have the ability and the resources in our community collectively to do what you said, to get out there. But I think we have to understand that it will take a lot of effort. And if we're being honest, I think that's where there's a little bit of step back. Okay, it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of sacrifice. It always has for any group. White people, who came from Europe, they sacrificed. Jews, as you said, and other groups. So the same thing. It's going to take sacrifice. We have to give up our time. We have to give up our money. We have to give up resources and so on. We have to, I think, collectively get to a point where we're willing to do that.
Something a little bit.
Yeah.
So, just to, sorry to drag this, but in terms of creating opportunities for ourselves, right? It can start from wherever we are. Okay. In engineering, for example, we organize, Joseph and I, we organize programs for the Black students in engineering. You know how we call them? Come eat jollof in Suya. Everybody shows that. We get to tell them the issues coming up. Ask any of the profs who is engineering. I have issues with Black kids in engineering. Why? When you come to the class, I was telling people this. You have the Jews in front, you have the Asians, you have the whites, and our boys are at the back, our girls at the back with big earphones. Okay? They are playing games. They are on their laptop. The professor is talking. You know what I mean? So then again, later on, when you go and you ask these people to form groups, nobody wants to be in a group with them because I don't want my GPA to drop. You know what I mean? So in as much as we are trying to create these opportunities, we can start from wherever we are and start, we have to say it we have to let our people know that this is how things have been happening and that is how things are not working for us. And so we need to change. You know what I mean? Forgive me, but that's some of these things that we want to grasp the opportunities. We want to take these things, but the very people around us are really not pulling the way. We have to drag them along, right? As educators, we have to. For math, we have to. For all these things, we have to drag them along. And I know that if we all do a collective effort, of course, it will happen. Nobody can stop us, right? That's it.
Can I say something? Sorry. So to me, I understand what you are saying, but I think a lot of this again comes back to anti-Black racism and the ways in which we struggle to navigate, particularly educational institutions, is not on the responsibility of the student alone. I'll draw from my own experience. I went to York as a grad student. I did my PhD here, and what we did as graduate students who were in disciplines across the university recognized that we were struggling in our programs because we were the only one in each space, and you constantly have to fight. You're fighting to get into courses, you're fighting to have your work be recognized, you're fighting to get opportunities for funding, and it gets exhausting. And so then it became, how can we strategize and organize collectively together so that the blame then isn't on us and how we are perceived, right? Because again, this goes back to what I was talking about in terms of like the narratives and how words and ideas and stereotypes kill us every single day. And this doesn't just start at higher education. This starts from when we are children and we are streamed. We're told to adjust the way that we dress. We're told to watch how we speak. There's only so much you can do, right? And so the point is we are trying to make interventions into this space and struggle collectively is what I'm trying to say is the response. And so, and also like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel because people have been doing this forever, right? And so what would it mean for us to join different spaces to help support each other? I think about like, even now I think about my students in my courses who are like, you know what? I really enjoy your class. I'm taking 5 classes this term. I'm really struggling. I can't get my work in on time. I need some space, or I need your support. What would it look like for us to adjust how we are also developing our curriculum to be able to support the students that are here so that they don't struggle? Like, we know disproportionately most of the Black and racialized students who have a higher, like, who make up a higher percentage of the students at York struggle and take longer to finish because of systemic barriers, not because of individual choices that they are making. And so what would it look like for, instead of us saying, you fix yourself, you fix this on your own, you have to adjust to this thing, what would it look like if we took the time together to be like, let's change what this place is doing so that it one, recognizes the spaces that we are coming from, the struggles that we have, and acknowledges the intelligence that we have. Because listen, I'm not an engineering student, but I sure as hell know it must be very difficult to get into that program. So those students, regardless of where they're sitting in the classroom, they're brilliant. They just need to be seen and to be treated with the respect that everyone else in the classroom is being treated with.
Thank you, everyone. I think this is a great opportunity to also highlight from a lot of the things of what I'm hearing in your discussion. You know, I really appreciated the history that you brought forward of your science fair student who's doing all these things in the community. But I think you let us know something about that student who had the privilege of having a father and a mother who are educated, who are in particular places, and has the resources and the time, and was bred from a long-standing sort of genealogy of family of education. You know, being an educator here as well as at York and then in other places. I did my PhD at UCLA, so it's also like a U.S. perspective. And so a lot of the Black students in my class want to go to college in their family, right? And so how do you navigate that when you don't have the somebody to help you get your homework, or how to navigate the look that you're getting from a university professor, or not being able to know that you have to have this gumption to go and seek out help, or you don't want to ask help because you know that each time you've asked help in high school, you look like the dumb Black kid. You know what I mean? So like, there's something to be said about, again, these stereotypes that are there, but need to be challenged every step of the way, and to be cognizant that if they weren't beforehand, they will look different once we get them in university. And I think a lot of what the solutions are sort of highlighting is this idea of community. We talk about community a lot, but it is often broken. It is often shattered in different ways, fragmented. Don't get me started about racial capitalism, you know what I mean? But there are particular ways that we are like also trying to, we would love to have communities to be able to come together, but we have rent. And, you know, I was a student who had like 2 jobs while I was doing my degree part-time, and, you know, working and bartending, doing, you know what I mean? And I think it's important to recognize that, like, I would have loved to be, I actually finished my undergrad here at York, but I had to do it part-time. I couldn't join any of the groups. I couldn't, and I wanted to, and I remember being in a group project with this like grad girl who was like, I forget what the group was called. I'm like, I can't, I have to go to work right now. You know what I mean? So I think these types of understandings need to come from us being in these spaces. And so that really brings me to, how do you see the future, right? How do you see the future landscape of how we can, you know, address the history and the present? How can we imagine doing these things? How can emerging technologies perhaps, or innovative teaching methods, like experiential learning, Black and African knowledge systems, not relying on Western knowledge systems, can be used to address the historical inequities that we see sort of develop today in Black education, and to support Black educators too, because also there's the double-edged sword that it all falls on our shoulders to do it anyways as well. So what are some future musings, I guess, or things that you're undertaking or thinking of undertaking, or just sort of thinking about in community right now, future landscape? Yeah.
Although I feel like I'm gonna take us back a little bit because I do want to address something too before it's still connected. But in a study I did recently, one of the Black youth I spoke with, who was in grade 10 at the time of the study, had shared. I had asked the question about, do you feel like, certain groups are inherently better in math than others? Because I was curious to see what they were going to share, and she was like that. No, but if you have been told over and over and over and over again that you are not, you don't belong in this space, it starts to seep in. And I think that's really important to recognize that, so in thinking about future landscapes, and I'm coming back to the comment that we need to change our spaces. With mathematics, mathematics needs to change. The system of mathematics needs to change so that young people, especially young Black people, don't feel like they don't belong in this space. In this study I'm talking about, it was by sheer coincidence. I wasn't looking for learners who loved math and that wasn't a criteria. But it just happened that a number of them that I spoke with actually enjoy math, have good grades if we're going by that as a measure, but they still constantly talked about the exhaustion that comes from having to just prove that feeling like they had to prove that they belonged in this space. They get a good score and a grade, and people are wondering if you cheated. Like that gets exhausting. It gets really, really exhausting, and so I feel like a lot of the work is on us in changing, doing the work to try to change our fields to be more to really redress and challenge these historical barriers that are still present. So thinking about my field and in mathematics education specifically, one of the things that I have tried to do, and a number of scholars have worked on, is using mathematics as a space where we are actually going to talk about issues. So we're going to learn the mathematics because you have to take all these silly tests and things, and we don't want to keep you from the benchmarks that in most societies exist. But as we're teaching the mathematics, we're also going to use that to talk about important issues, right? We're not going to teach mathematics in a way that is using examples that really are nonsensical, but using examples that really allow us to think about real issues that's going on in society. And of course, there's I don't know if this person in my field, Rochelle Gutierrez, came up with this or if she got this from somewhere, but really talking about how important it is to use, in my case, mathematics as a space where learners are able to, she uses this windows and mirrors metaphor. And so we need to be able to see ourselves in the curriculum, so a mirror there, but also use mathematics as a window to see others' experiences. And so that's a really important space that I see as a powerful space, despite the pushback. But as I tell my students, I teach future secondary math educators here at York, and one of the things I tell them is that while the government removed a lot of language, there still is language around culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy, and ensuring that our learners see themselves in the curriculum. That is in the curriculum. And so when a parent comes to you, you can be like, hey, the government told me to teach this way, and so we can use this in the ways that is necessary. And so so that's just something that I think is really important in how in the work that we're doing. And also I don't want to forget the point about supporting Black educators, and there are a number of Black educators that I've been privileged to encounter here in Toronto who teach me in my own practice. Like Octavia Beckles is one from the York Region District School Board, who just does such brilliant work in mathematics in her role there. But really ensuring that we're supporting, right? That I think the reality is that there is this power that exists in formal academic spaces, I suppose, that professors seem to be seen as higher, and I think this is false, by the way. But it does. But these hidden or not. Hierarchies do exist. And so how are we in the university context also ensuring that we're supporting the work, in my case, that teachers are doing on the school boards, making sure that they know that they're not alone, that they're educators that I've spoken to who really are nervous even about the work that they're doing because they feel like they don't have the protection that in some ways it's getting nebulous now, but in some ways we may have, we in the university context may have. So how can we make sure that we're joining forces so that they don't feel like they're alone on the battlefield, if you will.
Any other insights of future?
I do think that there is a lot to say here, but I'll limit it to a few points. One, I think the opportunity to be here as faculty tells of what York University is doing and the diversity when it comes to scholarship, right? Which means that given this privilege, each one of us has a responsibility to bring about a difference in how we teach, in how we reach out to the Black community, in how we reach out to individuals who have challenges. And we are aware of the challenges. We understand their situation, right? So with me, it comes to how I structure my syllabus, right? So that a portion of it goes to experiential learning. And in that space, you get to see the ability of the students, way different from when you have, let's say, a multiple choice question or something that they would have to, sometime respond, and maybe because of the trickery with these questions, they may not be able to excel, right? So that is one. But two, I have a lab, and I'm fortunate that the Dudley Institute invests some funds in my lab so that I'm able to recruit students. And so I throw it open to all students, and especially Black students. Come in, let me help you, support you outside what you are learning in class. So you have the research skills. Why do I do this? Because I do understand that a few years they need reference. And you need to have had a relationship. You need to have built something for someone to write something solid about you. And so last year, I had the opportunity of mentoring this student, Iriana Georges, and she came in with the excitement, wanting to learn, knowing nothing about research. She ended up getting this CIHR as a grant, right? So understanding that, I know that is a plus on her CV, right? Now, when it comes to opportunities, she goes on to present at conferences. Her abstract was accepted at the Global Health Conference. I'm sponsoring her to go, and that's Los Angeles, right? If you do not have the funds, there is no way you may create the opportunities, but it is impossible, right? So that responsibility means we need to figure out a way, because if each one of us is doing something to change the life of another person, I mean, in time, it may not be now, but in the nearest future, 10, 15, 20 years, if they are also doing same to 2 or 3 others, we begin to see the ripple effect, and they get better, right? So maybe I'll end at this point that when it comes to, I'm not sure how the syllabus is structured from one discipline to the other, but we need to make it in such a way that when it comes to references, because apart from being in class, probably they may not have an encounter with you elsewhere. So that you can talk about their, let's say, critical thinking skills, whatever is being sought after at graduate school or in other spaces. I think it helps that way. This way, I believe we'll start making difference one student at a time.
I love that. Thank you.
Any other last thoughts on futurity and innovative technology or teaching?
Yeah, so actually, I think this kind of speaks to your point about the development of curriculum and thinking about that and thinking about the history of Black studies and thinking about the ways in which student activism has been so central to it. That legacy continues on, especially at York today, right? It was the commitment of students and faculty coming together that was able to develop the Black Canadian Studies certificate. It was conversations that constantly happened, disagreements at table that helped develop different courses that helped address these kind of things that students were bringing up, being like, I work so many jobs, I do elder care, I do these things, I don't have time to take a full course load. And then people advocating for being like, okay, well, you know what, the work we're doing in community should also be recognized as courses, because you are doing the work that you like, that you're learning in the classroom. It's practical. And so there was folks like Dr. Andrea Davis had fought for and gotten a practicum that is available in the certificate for students to go work in community and have that credit go towards their degree, right? So really thinking about how can we reimagine what curriculum looks like that also honor Black life, right? Like we shouldn't always have to be studying and thinking through, and by all means, like we should be thinking about structural anti-Blackness and racism and how that shapes our world, but also that the violence that we experience is not the only thing that we should know, right? Like that's not the only way that we are. And so how can we honor that in the classroom? Creating different innovative assignments. So in some of my courses, I created a class based on my research on sound studies, but it's called Black Toronto Sounds, where the students have the option to create practical environment. So they go into the communities that they live in and do sound walks, right, as a way to respond to the violence of gentrification and the loss of these places, but are able to record the voices of the folks in the community that hold those stories so dear to them. And now I'm in talks with the public library to have those talks be available, those sound walks be available through there, so that it goes outside of the university, right? Like just because this is the meeting place where we are doesn't mean that Black should limit where our reach should extend to. So thinking about, these as pedagogical innovation that we can practice,
A lot to think of. Yeah, so I still have Solomon and Lauren. I feel towards the end I like to go back. If you have any last words on futurity, and then we'll open up to a Q&A.
So for me, just a couple thoughts. We might not actually address that question, but just a couple thoughts. So racism for me at its core is about power imbalance. And so we have to take advantage of the power that we have. So, at universities, this speaks to the comment that was made about first generation students. And I think about that a lot. So I spent a lot of my academic career in the United States as well. And that's really important from the point of view of, in the United States, there's a lot of identity is built around the university you go to. And so there's families that for 5 generations, family has gone to this one university. And I often think about that. It's not like somebody sits those kids down as they're about to go to university and they say, this is what you're going to experience. It's just, but they just somehow know, right? Because it's like osmosis. It's just been passed down. They just have that. We don't have that. If you're making now a first year student, you don't have it. So what can you do about it? Well, I think mentorship. Okay, so this is why mentorship is so important. And for students out there, first generation students, or maybe you're not even first generation students, but you have concerns or questions. My advice: find a Black professor. They don't even have to be in your field. They don't even have, because a lot of this, what we're talking about, is not field specific. So, they will help. They will be able to guide you and it's a safe space, and there's a community, and so forth. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing, back to this power imbalance and using our power. So, as Black professors, and particularly those who are tenured, and that's the top. So we should use that power. To your point about, advocating for the students, designing practicums, going to the curriculum committee, or maybe you're on the curriculum committee, you say, you know what, why don't we do this? We need a course here, or we need to tweak this and that. Use that power, use that voice to advocate for students. And then the last thing, because whenever in these events, there's always a bit of a negative tone because we're talking about problems. So I always like to end on a positive. So again, progress is being made. We need to understand that there are allies, right? We do have allies, and we need to embrace those allies and bring them into the fold, and work with them to affect change. It's not all bad, right? It's not all bad. There are things. Several universities in the last 2 years have had Black and Indigenous hiring initiatives. Okay, because they understand, like, for example, like WUF, I'll tell you a story of WUF. I think there's 800 faculty. I asked about 2 years ago, I asked, how many Black faculty are here? Because I don't see them. They couldn't tell me. We think there's 12, was the answer I was told. But don't hold us, we're not sure, right? Since that time, there's been a Black and Indigenous hiring initiative. We shouldn't need that. We can concede that. But the fact of the matter is, I don't really care, because now the 12, potentially 12, are now 18. Okay, so so we have to, again, take these victories, work with it, build up, and build that power, and come together and use our collective power to all stuff.
No, I do echo all the comments from the panel, right? It's a matter of we are working together. That's how I see it. And for challenges, of course, they will be happening. Sometimes it's easy to make changes, sometimes it's not. So, for example, for curriculum events, right? There's so much you can do. There are certain things, for example, in engineering, you would have to go for an engineering course reviewer to be able to make some of the changes, right? In my courses, I don't write exams. There is no final exams. So we all build something. We always do it. Engineering, for when it comes to experiential, I think it's a little bit easier because we get to build stuff. We get to see talks and all, right? And so it's a matter of people grasping the opportunities, or we as educators, directing them to some of these opportunities to how many of our high schools know that you can do research with talks, right? So remember 2019, I received an email from high school students in 10th, and it was wonderful. What do they want to do? They want to come spend some summer in the lab. So we letting our people know that, hey, these opportunities are out there too, right? We can take advantage of them. Letting our people know that, yes, we're going to need a reference. So I keep telling the students that, look, I asked them, where do you want to work at? I want to do this. Now you can build a CV. So you go there before you graduate, right? Take volunteer. For engineering, we have a whole bunch of programs. The research assistantship, we have paid research positions for undergrads. We have like so many things. Or maybe sometimes people don't know. So we as educators can actually kind of, in a nice way, get them to know that, hey, these opportunities are out there, right? We might need reference letters, support you. And so I think if we all do our part as educators, of course, we can make change. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much. I feel like, no one's really saying that, like sometimes it gets down, but I feel like it kind of got up all towards the end. You know, everybody has some great ideas in terms of mentorship and coming together in different ways, thinking outside the box and thinking within the box as much as we can, you know, navigating these academic streets in the way that that we're allowed to, and pushing the boundaries and even going beyond sort of the structure of academia. So I would like for us to first of all thank our wonderful and we have 15-20 minutes for Q&A. We could go maybe a little longer since we started a little later, but do we have any questions today? Yes.
Well, hi. I started a long time ago at York, sociology and science, culture and technology were in second age. So with this knowledge from long ago in sociology, just want to make some kind of remarks about the occupations and what is what. I remember my first textbook in sociology here was in one example that they gave us. The Jewish people are very good tailors, but bad cook. So they bad cook. I mean, professionally, men. Whereas French are very good chefs. So that's one of the example of stereotypes. So don't feel offended if it's just you are not targeted. But one of the other things that I would like to ask, sorry, I don't know your name. You talk about medication and Africa. No, yes. So because I'm Serbian, so we have a lot of in non-aligned country, Yugoslavia. So we had a lot of like students coming to study at us. We didn't have any of these kind of racism. I didn't even. That's the first time I encountered it here, but I don't know. And but we learned that Stalin in Soviet Union didn't allow shamanism. So some in Mongolia, some shamans who practice shamanism, all right, and they took some of them to educate them in physics. So do you have that practice in Africa when you have your own local medical people to be educated, to be sent with that traditional knowledge, to be sent to study that? To study not their traditional, but the knowledge of their tradition, whatever, herbs or magic, which is also legal. I mean, it is actually. And that was one question, whether they are taken from Africa to study that, to study further medication or medicine or some physics, let's say, or not. Or do you have at York, because I don't know now, whether in Black Studies, you do have traditional medicine from Africa, whether they study it or not? That's one question for you. And for mathematics, we have Einstein's first wife was Serbian. She was physicist, but she was just a wife of Einstein. She had a club foot, so she was a disabled woman, physicist at that time, but it's very rare for a woman to study physics. She was one of the very prominent physicians, but in the history, she's just Einstein's wife. And so not just because she's Serbian, she's not like or anything, she's not rational, but she was just not recognized at all. So it's not always that you have to be in certain race. You just could be in certain category of white that are not recognized, like Slavic people, for example. We can see that Nikola Tesla from my country was never recognized. Novak Djokovic, for example, is a tennis player, but he has to jump a lot of hurdles to be recognized. So it's not always necessarily. I just want you to answer me about this medical thing.
So thank you for that question. It's a very good question. And so I would say that when it comes to traditional medicine, you would find that with colonialism, there was sort of a negative outlook on it for some time. there was a shift towards westernized medicine, even though the pharmaceuticals come sometimes from these herbs, right? And so the interest there wasn't something that excited a lot of people. You end up becoming a physician, but not so much into those, right? And it is more recently that we see a shift towards it. All along, it's been oral tradition, right? So it's mostly my mom or my dad or my grandpa or my grandma is an expert in this field and knows these herbal medicines or whatever it is. And so they pass it on by generation. But academically, I think it's the last 5 or 10 years that is gained traction and people are seeing value in it. But you know, it also comes with costs. If you want to go into it, you have to study in certain spaces that have the machines, that have whatever it takes for you to be able to go in depth, do an in-depth study. And not many people have the sponsorship to go outside. Within the universities in Ghana, not a lot of the universities have that capability, right? And it's quite expensive. So yes, there have been, they put in place some systems to ensure that traditional medicine stays. They are able to go on to modernize it so that everyone can use it. But it's been just a few years back. Right? So that's what I can say. Your second question.
No, but what you mentioned that when they came, in order to exploit Africa, they have to learn how to fight malaria, and they learned it from the local population. So they somehow extracted that knowledge. And that's what I was referring to.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's think of it. Think of malaria, for example. When they came in, and this from indigenous knowledge, they were told that the bark of a particular tree, quinine, would help deal with this, right? And so they extracted it, made use of it for some time. It helped them at the time. But in 50 to 70 years, they modified it. And so now we have chloroquine, right? Instead of the quinine. Right? You can see where that is from. And so at the end of the day, which one is much easier? I take a few pills, that's okay, instead of going to extract the bark of a tree. And at some point, it even became, they monopolize it. So it happens, there are several things. When you think of smallpox, right, that there's a gentleman, someone talks about Hipponismus. He was a slave, and he told his slave master, whoever it was, about the solution. How do you do this? How you can fight some of these diseases, right? But at the end of the day, it was attributed to someone in the US, right, that has coming up with the solution, okay? And it helped the New World a lot. But today his name is nowhere near that, right? So there are several examples one could give of some potent solutions that have been extracted from, let's say, Sub-Saharan Africa without the right recognition given to the people. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question for Dr. Lawrence. You mentioned earlier about being wary of projecting, I guess, our feelings of fear onto children and parents, like saying, you know, this category isn't for you, and kids struggling that because they're hearing disappointing things from school and from their parents, and like you can't go into certain categories. I'm not a parent, but as an older brother, I see my sisters a lot pushing to try to get into certain places that are very white. And it's so difficult because, like, of course, like, I want to be able to support them, but I also know like there's so much disappointment for them there, and they've like faced so many awful things that their white peers don't have to face. And so I guess like where do you find that balance of like wanting to support someone but also trying to give them tools to work through racism and like combat that, because it's hard to have that conversation with a kid, right? They shouldn't have to have this on their mind. But
Yeah, I mean, great question, and I don't know why you're asking me because you have great experts.
you brought up the point.
Great question. So a couple things, right? So I bring that up because you said, I think you said the disappointment. So I'm a professor. That was not one of the fields that apparently was that was acceptable. So I'll never forget. So I was, my parents really wanted me to be a medical doctor, and I'll never forget the day I told my dad, no, I'm gonna go do a PhD, and he said, "What are you gonna do with that?" Right, and I'll never forget. Right, so this is why I say it's affected me. Right, so as parents, what you say to your kids, can affect them. I would never dissuade anybody from going into a career because when they enter that career, they may be faced with racism or difficult. Rather, what I would do is, as appropriate, as age appropriate, we have discussions. And the fact of the matter is, racism is everywhere, so you can't escape it in any profession, right? We know that. So I think it's trying to support and again have this community and build a community around them, so that they can be supported. That might mean that you don't have the answers, so you have somebody else. Like maybe you say, well, I have this friend Solomon, who knows, and so I'd like to introduce you. So it's about building the community and understanding the collective knowledge that we have and the collective power. That's one thing I think we don't do enough of, right? We're kind of in silos. Whereas if I could turn to you, now that I've met you, my child has problems with math, right? It's important, right? So we don't take advantage of that. Like I think, sometimes other communities, and I think, for me, like sitting here, and I should have said this at the start, I'm incredibly honored and proud to be here. I mean, I do so many panels, and I'm the only white person, and I think everybody will see that.
White
Right?
person.
I mean, sorry, only white person. Yeah. Not Dave Chappelle. No, black person. Excuse me. So to be here with a panel that looks like me, but it doesn't just look like me. I mean, esteem, and it's a huge honor and something that we shouldn't take lightly, because even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this would have been a struggle to find. So again, we do have this community. We are building this community, and I think when the time comes with your sisters, and then you're going to a field that's and they're starting to experience, unfortunately, racism. Now where you can find help.
Thank you.
Just to add to it, I feel like another way you could go about it is to expose your child or your sibling or whoever to the opportunities much earlier, right? Because sometimes, because of lack of exposure, their ability to think beyond their environment, their ability to think beyond the neighborhood in which they live in, their ability to think beyond what they've been told, it's not there. I mean, that is the truth. And so one of the things we could do right from an early age I know sometimes because of the substructure, because of the economic constraints, we are not able to do that. But being intentional about where I want my son or my daughter or whoever to be, right? That means I figure out what is in the system. And like one of the pros has indicated, there are several opportunities, right? And you allow them to be part of it. They may be very young, but I can tell you as they join these groups, and at that age, you rarely see racism. At that age, you rarely see, that discrimination because they are all kids. But the exposure it gives them begins to build in that person a certain capacity, it begins to change the person's mental model about where I can be and where I should be 10 years from now. And so that is another way parents could go about it. And I mean, you may live wherever, but I have examples of students who lived in probably the most or the poorest neighborhoods, but they've risen to become medical doctors with distinction. They've risen to certain positions that you rarely think someone like that would be. And it's because of the exposure they got at an early age.
Thank you.
Time for one more question. You have that. Oh, two more? Okay. Oh, three. Yes.
First of all, what a wonderful way to start off Black History Month. So we want to thank you for the panel. Just seeing the beautiful names and the faces on the screen, especially with the doctor beside their name, was just inspirational for us all. So I'm on my second, I call this my second life here at York. I'm aspiring to go to Osgood, and I came back to do another degree before I do that. And I just have to tell you that this is my third year here at York, and I walk around the campus and everybody thinks I'm a professor. And so many people say, oh, I don't meet Black professors, especially men. And I'm like, I'm not a professor. So it's good to meet the real professors, the real Black men, and I can now introduce them and give them some names of people I've met myself along the way. So that's very inspiring for fellows since my good friend Ransford and myself. I have the saying that says that if you want to know how to get somewhere, find someone who's been there. So it's great to have people as yourself. And you talked about mentorship earlier, and that is very important along our journey. It's been an unbelievable experience coming back at this age, at this time of my life. And I was very apprehensive, had a lot of anxiety as a Black male coming back to school, what it would be like. And I have to tell you, it has been such an empowering, enlightening, inspiring experience on so many different levels. And I have been uplifted by this community at York University, and I was not expecting that. And I keep wondering, why is this happening and why me at this time? And, I look at the pandemic and maybe a lot of social justice movements that happened during that time. And I guess that's where my question is for the educators, is looking at the pedagogy before and after pandemic, how has that changed? And, one other statement I just want to say is that, a lot of my friends and family thought I was crazy to come back to school at this age. And part of the issue I find is us not putting us in places because we put labor ahead of education. And I've worked for 25 years and I'm having the time of my life. Yes, I'm a lot poorer, for sure. I'm not making it every day. I'm sure a lot of the students here can attest to that. But the internal fulfillment I feel to be on the path that I'm on replaces all the money in the world that I can make for myself personally. And I think more people need to be in that mindset than just making money and labor, because that is not fulfilling at the end of the day. I think everyone in this room can say that. So anyway, what is my question? My question is, how has the pandemic changed? I guess I'll ask Dr. Ola Muhammad if she doesn't mind, since I'm actually also part of the Black Certificate program. So I've heard of you, I've heard great things about you. So it's great to meet you also in person. So if you can answer and anyone else wants to answer, that'd be great. But again, thank you for today and the fabulous way to start off Black History Month, and I hope to attend a lot more events throughout the month. Thank you.
Right, so it was, how is, like teaching pedagogy?
Yeah, before, yeah. Yeah, pre and then both of them.
I mean, difficult questions to think through. I think for me personally, I don't really think much has changed in my classroom. Because I think about what the commitment is in doing as a Black Studies scholar and to Kelly, love, study, struggle, right? And so if anything, that what I have noticed is actually a shift in some regards with the larger kind of institutions response to Black studies and Indigenous studies, right? With like the mass hirings that people have mentioned, but then still like, so, sorry to be the negative one, but I think parts of I think some of the questions have changed, right? In terms of like, okay, there's this response to change, and call to change structures, which people have been more open to, right? We see these mass hirings, we see the development of workforces and those offerings, which is incredible. But I still think, in this moment, it's still important to be suspicious, and to be committed to like, what does it mean to be committed to these struggles in this moment, and how do we have to adjust and adapt to doing this type of work? So some of my questions are, okay, we've created more opportunities for people to be hired. What structural supports do people have to be successful here? Because in 10 years down the line, if this doesn't work out in this moment, it will be, we gave you the jobs, you got all the money in those 5 years, what have you done, right? So again, it's like, we see surface level changes, and what we need is more structural changes. And so I see this this is my question of the institution and of all institutions, right? Like, and in some other industries, so I teach like a Black pop culture class, and we look at, how diversity hires in various other industries, in this moment now, like post George Floyd, we see a lot of folks leaving their higher up positions because they have said the expectation of me as an individual has been, it was impossible, right? And so instead of us having this commitment to just representation at this level, what does it mean for us to change what the basis of it to actually have a change, right? And I see from a student level a large commitment to this work. I see a lot more diversity in the types of students that are in my courses who are committed to not only understanding the language of the work that they are committed to, particularly in dealings with racism, colonialism, and structural racism, right? But saying like, what can I do? And the thing is you don't technically, I'm like, I don't have all of the answers to this, but the commitment to studying together and working together and addressing and trying things and having them fail and reapproaching it and redesigning what we do, that is what I'm interested in. So I think from then to now, I see a larger commitment to change. But again, it's something that it's not a quick response. It's a long-term commitment. And that's something that I think many places still are struggling with figuring out. And it has to be the reminder that we tell these places, like, this is not just now. This is a life. So hopefully.
Yes, it does. Yes. It was supposed to be a huge awakening moment in our society and civilization, right? So that brings a lot of context. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Akira, and I study international development and African studies. So it's exciting to talk about education. I guess I'm reflecting some of you kind of touched on my question, but if you feel called to answer. So I was interested in the discussion about like the perception of students, relationships and dynamics within the community, and like bridging the gap. So we talk a lot about bridging the gap, but like sometimes neglect to talk about like what that looks like. And there's a lot of debate there about like how will we, like, can that be achieved through capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to ask you, how can we bridge the gap between like the upper middle class that do get the experience of like higher education, like the highly educated, to invest back into the community, to colonize their views of other Black students, kind of like how you were talking about the ways that we view Black students in the back of our classes. So how do they decolonize their views of the community, and then the ways they operate in class? How are we using the syllabus to break stigmas that other students have of our Black students? So like, what's one way that you commit in your syllabus or in your work to transforming the educational experiences for Black students and decolonizing education experience. I know in your class last night, you could do it a lot, so.
I did. Yeah, so I mean, I think largely all of my classes, some of the things that I always tell people is one, just like in my courses, and in general with humanities, like I feel like there's this like perception that, you know, these are, you know, kind of abstracted, like enjoyable topics, which absolutely they are. I'm like, but again, it's about how we socially engage in the world and what our commitments are to each other. And so one, you have to come to these courses with an investment in, or like a dedication to becoming a critical thinker, right? And so I always tell people in my Black pop culture class, for example, I'm like, if you come into my class and you expect us to talk about things that you enjoy and whether they're objectively good or bad, that's not what you're getting here. I'm getting you to interrogate these things. And so if you leave my class and you hate yourself afterwards because you're always asking, why is this like this? What is happening here? I'm like, then I've done my job, right? The commitment is doing that to a development of critical thinking. Also, that the work of Black studies is not just on Black people, right? We live in a world of relations with everyone. And so this has to be a commitment to everybody to understand what is going on and what your investment is. And also, actually, that's also the other thing that I always say in classes, like, what is the reward that you get from what you do in the world, and like, and what are the benefits of it? And if it's like invested in kind of like white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchy, right? Like these are the things that we constantly try to aspire to, because the world says like there's this mythical norm, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, like you can achieve this. But guess what? That is a lie that is told to all of us. So what would it mean if we divest from that and really think about what it means to live relationally with each other otherwise? That means a commitment to constantly struggling and studying collectively. So that's the kind of stuff that I try to incorporate to my classes.
Yeah, like just like one way you commit to transforming the educational experiences for Black students, and also like breaking stigmas amongst like educators and other non-Black students.
Yeah, so again, yes, again, this is the work of all of us. So reminding people that, and also being like, me as the educator, just because I'm at the front of the room doesn't mean that I have all the answers. We all come with knowledge together. And so that means there will be disagreements in classes, there will be arguments or whatever, but the aim is not to like shame people, but the aim is to really try to interrogate and understand what is the knowledge that we come to know, why do we accept it as is, and what would it mean for us to challenge that? And if you can do that in every class, any discipline, I think that is the point.
Can I add something, and perhaps I will collaborate with Anna later on, but I love pop culture and I always bring pop culture into my math classes. And one task that I have my students do is, I think I just called it math in pop culture. It's not very exciting, but what they really, but what I ask them to do is to look up movies and TV shows that they remember that talk about math in them, and analyze who is doing the math, who is teaching the math, so that it's not me just making, telling you this is how things are, but that you see it for yourselves as well. And as someone who just deeply loves the movies and TVs and things like that, really trying to figure out ways to change the representation that we do see in visual media, because what we do see is that it's just reinforcing this notion that non-white people don't belong in this math space. And one of my biggest delights is to share A Different World, which yes is old, but it's like it's such a it is the idea that Dwayne's character loved math and was also, trying to see the words, not nerdy. Because it's just I think there's something about that make this well-rounded character who one of his attributes was that he just happened to like and love math. We don't see that. And I've been keeping track of things when I watch things and I see Black characters who like math, but there's always a comma. There's something else. There's something off about them. About their character. It's like we cannot be fully. I don't want to use the word normal because I don't like that word, but we can't be well-rounded. and still like math. Wayne's character is such an anomaly in what we see. And so that's some of what I try to do in class. And I think because my students are going on to be future secondary math teachers, so important for me from day one. You know, one of the things we do in day one is reflecting on ourselves. Did we see others who looked like us in class? Were there teachers who looked like us in class? And there's always a discussion afterwards, especially from the non-white students or even the white students that, yeah, everyone actually looked like me in this class. Why was that? Because some of us are not having those experiences, and really making sure that we, from jump, we're recognizing that in this mathematics space, things are not neutral, even if people claim that it's just numbers, everything. No. There's a lot of underlying factors there.
That's great to hear. We have the one question. If we close us off.
Thank you very much for this. And I just wanted to ask about, I mean, now we have representation, like we have given that representation because we've been asking for it for a long time. And we can see a lot of things being done to give us a lot of representation. And I just wanted to find out or perhaps get a comment on it extending to women, because every time we see something like that, we kind of also don't see a representation for women in this sense. Like, let me say maybe for engineering, we already have maybe a problem with finding a lot of women in that field, right? And much more being a Black and a woman. I think it will be even so much difficult, right? So I wanted to find out, like, you think that it will be a huge hurdle, right? Let me say coupling, getting women into this kind of representation also, and then still having the quote unquote, like clearing the racism kind of thing from that. I don't know if my question makes sense, and I'll direct it to all of
I hear that I was an engineering major. I did graduate as an electrical engineer and math, so representation. But I for me, the question is, what I would throw back is that it's not on us. There's something about these fields also that are not, like, what do the fields need to do? What are the structures? Because as a Black woman who was studied in engineering, it's a double sword. You know, think about Kimberly Crenshaw's work around intersectionality. You're dealing with this, you're dealing with this. Is the field, is there support? If we say we want to recruit all these people, now we exist, we want to be here, but what is the support? Because at some point it also gets exhausting, right? So I don't have an answer, but my question is, it's not on. Just like I believe Black people can do math, we're not incapable in any way. But what is it about the structures? And the same way Black women can do engineering if they want to, but what's going on with the structures to ensure that we thrive in these spaces?
I think one aspect is that, gender, some of the same issues, there's some of the same, not some of the same issues, but some of the same barriers. Right. So engineering, it's a field where women are discouraged. Just like how Black people are discouraged, can be discouraged from entering certain fields. And there are many ways that could happen, beginning at the high school or even elementary school level, being told you're not good, that's not a field you should go in. So I think I try to, while there are the different groups have differences, I do certainly try to find common ground in terms of the barriers that may exist, and if you can decrease those barriers, then it's representation.
Yes, and I would add this. Originally, as a sociologist, when you think of the gendered perspective to occupations, it's it comes with a number of issues, right? Having written at some point my thesis on the multiple roles of women and their career development, you would find that it is a hard nut to crack, right? You may be given the opportunity, but it is shrouded in a number of things, right? You are trying to seek tenure, and you have a child, you have two, you have three. At some point, it's how do you balance it? And it's not just in education. A recent paper on surgeons, right? They did a study and they found out that, yes, you have women striving to get in, but they themselves do not feel adequate. There are specific components of medicine or departments that they find themselves, family medicine, that is probably going to work for them to be able to balance things up, right? And so at the end of the day, there are challenges, but you would hear narratives as to you either choose this, right? You either choose your career or you choose family. You cannot have both at the same time. If you want both, you have to do it sequentially, right? So there are a number of factors at play, and I don't think I'm probably the best person to answer this question. You have a lot of ladies here who have gone through the system and they understand some of the challenges. Maybe they can add to it.
I mean, I'm just, the little moderator, but I have experience and, I think there's something to be said about, yes, the double burden of sort of like having to be very strategic about family. But also that has a lot to do with like who gets to share the labor at home, who is expected to do the labor of child rearing and these types of things. But I think that also translates in the academy and in a work setting as well. So I'm a professor in the School of Gender, Sexuality and Women's Studies. So I guess I have a lot to say about this, but what's really interesting with the type of knowledges that I teach is that it speaks to a particular type of violence that resonates with a lot of people. And I'm very approachable, I've been told. So just that to say that I speak on these particular things, I look the way that I do, and I try to be as inviting as mentorship as I can. But there is not one semester since I started my academic journey in academia, from my master's to now, that I don't have at least 1, 2, or 3 students divulging issues of sexual assault or issues of particular domestic violence or any types of these really hard issues since 2013. At least 4 or 5 students a year with these types of traumas, trying to be able to relate. And that's something I take on and I'm okay with, but it's also a lot to take on. And that's not something that I can write in my tenure file, that I've been dealing with this kind of care in a way that is not expected from other peers in my field or not in my field, but it's not something that you think about, yeah, professor, that's a part of the job that I'm doing, you know what I mean? And so I think there's these types of nuances in terms of like what that gendered, racialized professor, educator looks like and it's expected to do. And then it's, if I don't do that work, I know that, the mental health services are not that great. Like, what am I going to do? Who are they going to be able to share that with? Maybe they won't be able to share that with anybody. And then when I was at UCLA, there was mandatory reporting. And then that was a whole mess too, because they just want to have a safe space to talk about these things without, the police getting involved. And how do I navigate that as, I have to hop on a plane and ask 10 people to sponsor this one conference I have to go to because, I need to put it on my CV so I can get a job. So like, I think these are the types of things and negotiations that come with like a gendered perspective, a gendered experience, and a racialized experience that,
You wanna end? Yeah.
Just a minute or two. Thank you very much. Thanks to the panelists for this exciting conversation. So, friend and the other colleagues. My name is Emmanuel. I'm from background. I'm currently a community fellow at the Data Lake Institute of Global Health Research. This is my first meeting here, and I'm really excited about what I'm hearing. But my question is, we have a lot of young people from this community we are talking about. And I'm not so sure that they are confident that they can find solutions to some of the issues that we have raised in this room today in our midst. Why do I say that? It also explains why, if you look at their participation, looking at the numbers, and you can go back into your records and look at the numbers, for instance, in the institution, and how many of them actually participate in the activities and events, what proportion of them. It tells a lot. Okay, do people really have confidence that they can find solutions to these things? We are encountering a psychological warfare. That's the way I want to see it. It's deep-rooted. But I'm glad we have discussed here that there's a lot of hope, and I believe so. There are so many opportunities we need to take advantage of. How do we take advantage of these opportunities systematically? We need to articulate that well and let our people know. In the academia, we need to form the bridge between our communities, where we have the families, and the decision makers. That's a Herculean task. And how well are we doing that using these existing platforms that we have? What interfaces or interactions are we having with the common people down there in the community, raising all of these issues, getting their inputs, and then interfacing with the decision makers to make sure that these issues are reflected in curriculum, they're reflected in grant making opportunities or whatever, planning, strategic planning, and all of that. So that's the kind of systematic interventions or approaches that we need to begin to look at. It's good to talk about it, but it's time to move beyond talking about it, to have concrete strategies of pushing those boundaries, really. And I'm glad, I must say that in the last, if you look at, even in, I'm sure in this institution, if you look at it, I'm glad Professor Lawrence talked about it. He said, let's not dampen our, our emotions about this. We've made significant progress, and we'll continue to do so. We've made progress, and we can make more progress. So let's not give up. Let's not quit. We can do it. We know it, and let's push it. Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, now it's time to close out. I want to again thank you to our esteemed panel. This was a very generative conversation, and about the specificity of Black education and Black educators, and the specificity is very important because it speaks to sort of the rest of the world through another lens. And I think you've offered brilliant insights to that. And what a great day, great event to start Black History Month. So thank you so much. Please check out this is like plug. Please check out the Harriet Tubman Institute website. We have a lot of great events coming up this month, and we look forward to seeing you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know.